But I want to linger on that 7th verse, Matthew 24:7, and that middle portion of it, the pestilence. Because no matter how much we talk about Al-Qaeda and, the bubonic plague, that's just really not the big thing. Because what is going on, far more deadly and volatile than the black plagues of the past, are the plagues we're not prepared for in the present. The one that anti-infectious disease people and the CDC and the World Health Organizations are constantly watching. You see, there is a underlying kind of constant progress of germs mutating into going from animal diseases into human diseases. And that process is constantly being monitored. In fact, also in January, on January 18th of this year, a 27-year-old woman from eastern China died of the bird flu. That happens regularly around the world. The problem was, this is the second one this year where it was almost clearly, although the Chinese government tries to hide it, an animal-to-human transmission. See, that's what they get nervous about. That's when the doctors in the World Health Organization start sweating. Because the most populous nation on earth, 1.2 billion people in China, has this interesting food cycle. They love Peking duck and they love their sweet and sour pork. And so they have their pigs and their ducks and their waterfowl all kind of around. And, there's this kind of lower than the FDA, sanitation going on here. And you have very, very easy transmission between the pigs, which seem to have very similar systems to us as far as getting colds and everything, and these avian-born, the duck-born, flying bird poultry form diseases, and they go and crisscross between themselves. But the danger is when they go from the animals to the humans. Because once they mutate like that, they're just virulent. They're very powerful. And if you read what they say, and I'll read you a few of the findings, they basically say that every day a menacing plague is stalking our planet. Quietly in farms and homes across Asia, a global, deadly, unstoppable influenza pestilence is mutating. Each strain is strengthening. And each day it's trying to find a way out. Of what? Of being contained in the pork and duck environment and get into the human realm. The last time it got out, which was in 1964, 4 million people died just like that of this Hong Kong, they called it, flu. Before that, 80 million died of the very same thing in 1918. In fact, in 1918, it was the greatest disaster America ever had, if you look back in history. 1 million people died in a very few weeks in America in 1918. In fact, I knew a personal survivor of that when I pastored out in Los Angeles. Martha Bueller was her name, and her father was a pastor in downtown Los Angeles in 1918. And they cordoned off downtown L.A. and put up martial law and a fence. And the people that had it stayed inside. And the people that didn't have it stayed outside. And the people inside died. And the people outside survived. That's how bad it got in America in 1918. And her dad, a pastor there, was on the outside and quite healthy. And he, seeing that they were locking those people in, crossed the barrier and stayed inside. And became the pastor to those who were dying of the influenza and burying them and everything else, and shared the gospel with many. But I want you to see the big picture of life and death to get it all in perspective. Almost 5 people die every month on earth anyway. Okay, so don't get nervous. 5 million a month die anyway. But something bigger, something more frightful is right here in verse 7. Jesus said a plague, a pestilence, a wall of death is going to stalk not just 5 million. I mean, that's just normal life on planet Earth. 5 million just die. That's just normal. 55 million a year, 5 million a month. It's just normal. But this is what's bad. This plague Jesus said, if the catastrophic nature of this pestilence didn't stop, as he says in here, he says, if this didn't stop, then all flesh would be ended. If you read the rest of Matthew 24. You see, this is on a global nature, causing a fourth of all the people to die. It could wipe out all of human life. Every year, 129 million people are born. 55 to 56 million die. And basically, we have 73 million more people, 6 million a month around the planet. That means every month there are 11 million born, 5 million die, 6 million survive. And you can just, there's this little clock, you can see it there, 4.1 births every second, 1.8 deaths every second, and 2.3 people that survive every second. I always think 0.3, that's cute. But look what Jesus says as we go to Matthew 21, because I want you to see, Jesus preached this sermon in three different versions. That's why we have the synoptic gospels. Luke 21 gives another form of this sermon on the side of the Mount of Olives. And in verse 11, Jesus said one of the signs of his coming is when we see the onslaught of global pestilences. Luke 21:11. Jesus said there'll be great earthquakes. Now, Matthew just captured earthquakes. But Luke, the synoptic gospel, kind of like the stereophonic version, enlarges on it. He says there are great earthquakes in various places. There are famines and pestilences. And then he says fearful sights and great signs. Well, there's always been diseases, plagues, and pestilences, but never have they been global until the advent of global travel. You understand that? That's why they put the fence up in L.A. They localized it. And they did that all over the world in the huge influenza of 1918. They just said, and they just shut everything down. But you can't shut everything down anymore. In the number of days it takes for the virus to germinate and go full-blown, the people who are carrying it, who don't show any symptoms for several days, can crisscross the world and be through Narita, and they can be through Miami International, and they can be at O'Hare, and they can be coughing on your sandwich, and you not even know it. And it just spreads to every corner of the earth because remember Daniel 12? We're global travelers. And so, if you think about it, most carriers of a plague would die before they got very far until the 19th century with steam engines. And then with air travel in the 20th century, it's now possible to harbor a plague or a pestilence and board a flight and land before you get to the final stages, and thus expose everyone on your whole journey to that plague. And look what Jesus said in the same context. And if you back up to Mark 13, I'll give you one more version of this Olivet Discourse. Mark 13, verse 20. He's commenting on the very same thing. Jesus said, when he's commenting in Mark 13:20 about how powerful these disasters will be, Mark captures these words from Christ. Mark 13:20. He says this, unless the Lord shorten those days, no flesh would be saved. Now that's how powerful the warfare, the famines, and the pestilences get. Now we know from Revelation 6 that a fourth of all the people die. Right now, that's about 1.75 billion people. Now that's a bad case of the flu, to have 1.75 billion people die. It's amazing to think of the numbers we're talking about.